10 most bombed countries in the world. Number 10. Japan. Japan was the target of the most devastating bombing in history when the United States dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945, killing over 200,000 people and ending World War II. Japan also suffered from conventional bombing raids by the US and its allies throughout the war, especially on Tokyo and other major cities. Number 9. Iraq. Iraq has been bombed by various countries for decades, starting with the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s, followed by the Gulf War in 1991, the US-led invasion in 2003, and the ongoing fight against ISIS. According to some estimates, over 100,000 bombs have been dropped on Iraq since 2003 alone, destroying much of its infrastructure and causing civilian casualties. Number 8. Vietnam. Vietnam was heavily bombed by the US and its allies during the Vietnam War, which lasted from 1955 to 1975. The US conducted Operation Rolling Thunder, a massive aerial campaign that targeted North Vietnam's military and industrial facilities, as well as Operation Linebacker, which aimed to cut off supplies from China and the Soviet Union. The US also bombed South Vietnam to support its allies and counter the Viet Cong guerrillas. It is estimated that over 7 million tons of bombs were dropped on Vietnam during the war. Number 7. Cambodia. Cambodia was also a victim of the Vietnam War, as the US secretly bombed its eastern regions to disrupt the supply lines of the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese Army. The bombing campaign lasted from 1965 to 1973 and killed tens of thousands of Cambodians, many of them civilians. The bombing also contributed to the rise of the Khmer Rouge, a brutal communist regime that killed millions of Cambodians in a genocide. Number 6. Afghanistan. Afghanistan has been bombed by various countries since the Soviet invasion in 1979, which sparked a long and bloody war that lasted until 1989. The US and its allies also bombed Afghanistan after the 9/11 attacks in 2001, as part of their war on terror against the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. The bombing has continued until today, as the US and NATO forces try to support the Afghan government and fight against insurgent groups. Number 5. Syria. Syria has been bombed by multiple actors since the outbreak of its civil war in 2011, which has killed over 500,000 people and displaced millions more. The Syrian government has bombed its own people with barrel bombs, chemical weapons, and other indiscriminate attacks. The US and its allies have bombed Syria to target ISIS and other extremist groups, as well as to deter the Syrian regime from using chemical weapons. Russia and Iran have also bombed Syria to support their ally Bashar al-Assad. Number 4. Yemen. Yemen has been bombed by a Saudi-led coalition since 2015, when it intervened in its civil war to support the internationally recognized government against the Houthi rebels. The coalition has conducted thousands of airstrikes on Yemen, hitting civilian targets such as schools, hospitals, markets, and weddings. The bombing has caused widespread death and destruction, as well as a humanitarian crisis that has left millions of Yemenis facing famine and disease. Number 3. Egypt. Egypt was bombed by several countries during its wars with Israel in the 20th century, such as the Suez Crisis in 1956, the Six-Day War in 1967, and the Yom Kippur War in 1973. Egypt also faced bombing from Libya in 1977, when it clashed with Muammar Gaddafi over territorial disputes. Egypt has also been targeted by terrorist attacks from groups such as ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Number 2. Nigeria. Nigeria has been bombed by its own government and by terrorist groups such as Boko Haram and Islamic State West Africa Province, ISWAP. The Nigerian government has used airstrikes to counter the insurgency in its northeastern regions since 2009, often causing collateral damage to civilians and humanitarian workers. Boko Haram and ISWAP have also carried out suicide bombings and other attacks on churches, mosques, schools, markets, and military bases across Nigeria. Number 1. Laos. Laos is the most bombed country in the world, according to Guinness World Records. It has been estimated that between May 1964 and February 1973, the U.S. dropped over 2 million tons of bombs on Laos, more than the total amount of bombs dropped on Germany and Japan during World War II. The U.S. bombed Laos to disrupt the Ho Chi Minh Trail, a supply route used by the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong. The bombing left Laos with millions of unexploded ordnance, UXO, that continue to kill and injure people today.